Ambassador Christopher Hill, thank you very much for coming to the Krasnoy event series, for coming to UNC-Chapel. You were involved with North Korea, you were lead negotiator for the United States, you were ambassador to South Korea, to many other countries, so you really know what you talk about when you talk about the North Korean problem. At the moment we have a bit of a stalemate despite the summit in Singapore. What can we do to resolve the situation? What would you recommend the current administration should do?
Well, first of all, I think the current administration needs to put together a team and needs to understand this isn't going to get solved overnight, but nor is it solved yet. So they need to, I think, work on this. Secretary Pompeo will be making another trip. One hopes that they will understand that there are some things they need to do, like get a declaration, get a clear understanding of what their programs are, and see if North Korea can more systematically do away with their programs. And then the second thing I think we need to do a much better job of is working with other countries and kind of putting together some kind of architecture so that China is somehow involved, and South Korea, Japan, because I think we have a situation, especially with China, that there are a lot of people who say it's hard to work with China, but frankly, it's even harder to work against China.
But hasn't that been done already? For example, when you think of the sanctions regime, China has actively participated. Or do you see that changing? Is the trade war affecting China's position in the North Korea question as well?
You know, I don't think the trade war is directly affecting China's position, but I think when you have trade wars, they become very public. And so you have, I think, public mood perhaps shifting a little in China. And I think the administration perhaps needs to do a better job of kind of coordinating what it's trying to do, whether it's trade wars or dealing with nuclear weapons in North Korea. I would suggest that nuclear weapons in North Korea are a more urgent task.
Mm-hmm. What is the state of affairs between South Korea and the United States right now? There have been complications regarding trade again, and tariffs and the bilateral trade agreement. And has that affected the North Korea question as well?
I think the U.S.-South Korea trade relationship has been pretty much well handled, and I think they have an agreement on what the modifications were going to be or are to the U.S.-South Korean trade agreement, the so-called KORUS agreement. So I don't think that has affected so much the issue of dealing with North Korea. I think the problem is the U.S. is not committed to a structure, to a kind of architecture that includes other countries. And I think that's necessary because I think to have it just bilateral, I think is going to be problematic for the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Isn't in the end it impossible to get North Korea to denuclearize? Despite all the sanctions, all the pressure we have been putting on North Korea for many, many years, in the end it seems the North Koreans are dead set on obtaining and maintaining a nuclear missile for their self-protection, as they say. Shouldn't we just believe them and say, well, okay, let's turn you into an official nuclear power?
I think just allowing North Korea to have nuclear weapons is a path that would be fraught with danger. After all, how would South Korea react to that? How would Japan react to that? No, I think the task for the U.S. is make it clear to the North Koreans that their future with nuclear weapons is much worse than their future would be if they gave up those nuclear weapons. So that requires a serious negotiation with some very sincere offers to be put on the table to convince North Korea that if they continue on this path, we will continue to chase them down and make life very difficult for them until they make this decision to get rid of these weapons of mass destruction.
But how can we make the North Koreans believe the United States and other countries that the reassurances given to them if they denuclearize will actually be there for a long time, maybe forever, that the United States is not going to invade, that the United States is not breaking its promises, like in the case of Libya or the Iranian nuclear deal. So how can we give more confidence to the North Koreans?
I think there's no question there's a problem in terms of convincing the North Koreans or anyone that the U.S. Stance will not change in the next administration. But I think that speaks to the need of having better multilateral structures, because after all, it's not just the North Koreans, it's the Russians, the Chinese, others who would be interested in making sure there are ironclad assurances that the U.S. does not change its position. So I think the answer to that question is rooted in the kind of structure of the negotiations.
What is your evaluation of the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un? Is he a man one can deal with? Is he a man one can trust in the end? Or is he really as irrational as the press sometimes reports?
I don't think he's irrational, but nor do I put a lot of trust in him, as the old, to paraphrase the old Tina Turner song, what's trust got to do with it? This is about verification. I think there's some flexibility in his thinking that is well worth pursuing, but whether it means anything in the end, time will tell. But I think the U.S. should be, sticking to its position that we need to have a denuclearized Korean Peninsula, not just North Korea, but we don't want any nuclear weapons anywhere in the Korean Peninsula. And I think in so doing, and being clear with a kind of concept of known consequences, I think we can convince the North Koreans that they have a better future without their weapons than they do with their weapons.
I was once told that Kim Jong-un is in his mid-30s, that he wants to be in power for another 30 or 40 years at least, and that he doesn't want to be a pariah, doesn't want to be isolated, that he actually wants to enjoy his life as a leader, and therefore he's actually genuine in his intention to open up and to make North Korea a member of the international community. Would you believe there's something in that?
There may be something in that. Certainly, I think he's gotten a taste of what it's like not to be so isolated. He's had much more of a world reception than he did before. So I think it's going to be up to him. He needs to make a decision, but I think he would be better off without these nuclear weapons, and so I think it would be in his interest to try to devote himself to the task of seeing how to get rid of them.
During your talk, or during the discussion, we agreed that the Trump administration is unlikely to offer you a new position. What about the North Korean regime? If they asked you, Christopher Hill, why don't you come and be an advisor? Would you accept?
Not in a million years. The only country I advise is my own.
Thank you very much, Christopher Hill, Ambassador Christopher Hill. It's a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for coming to UNC-Chapel Hill.
Thank you.